So we're starting with our first tree. We're working with a sponge. You want to work with, your sponge kind of on its really crevicey side. Okay? We're going to do an autumn tree on a light blue background, which we have right here. We'll save the yellow to red background for a summer tree. And we have 3 color tones mixed. We have our light yellow, we have our light orange yellow, and then we have kind of our burnt orange. You're going to start with the lightest tone, because with trees we start with the lightest tone. So notice that just soaked it right up. I may have to mix some more. And we want to remember, trees are not lollipops, and lollipops are not trees, unless you're in the Lorax. Which, not to say we couldn't do that, because we might. But you want to make your tree kind of odd looking. If we look out at trees, look out the window, none of them are super evenly shaped. There are a few, if they're super coiffed. But we're not doing coiffed trees. So the technique I'm going to ask you to do, and you're going to come down maybe about a little less than halfway. You can have your tree go right off of your picture plane. That's totally fine. And you're going to do the light, but notice when I'm doing this light yellow, I'm turning my sponge. I don't want to have my sponge all go in the same direction with my hand going in the same direction, because then it'll make like a pattern, and we don't want it to look like a pattern. We want it to look like leaves, and you want to make like I'm going to make it stick out over there and come down over here, and then be a little oddly shaped, and I'm going to have it kind of come up off the page on the top. So you're going to use all that yellow, soak it right up, make an odd shape, and again, we are starting with the lighter colors. We talked about this before, but I'm going to review that. We are starting with the lighter colors and working to darker colors, because you can cover over lighter colors with darker colors, but you cannot cover over darker colors with lighter colors, right? Give yourself a great tree shape. Make it kind of oddly shaped. All right. And then you can kind of dab it off a little on a paper towel. We're working in the same color range, so okay, we're going to take that color tone and we're going to go over this. And at this point, I need you guys to think about your light source. On the other one, I did my light source on the upper left. I'm going to do my light source on the upper right this time, just to change it up. So I want to keep it light over here. Those are going to stay very light. And I'll have a little bit in there, but I want it darker on the lower right, or lower left. So light source is this direction. So I'm going to come in with that darker color. You make it a little blending, which is okay. Again, turn that sponge. You can do a little bit up towards your lighter tones, but get that orange color on there. There's going to be a little bit of light showing through. You can see some of that light blue background will remain, which is good. We want that. And I'm going to bring a few pieces down, because that's going to go behind my tree a tiny bit. I'm going to dab that off, and then we're going to, once you're done with that, I'm going to have you guys start to trace. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it once lightly on this, but then I'll show you a darker version so you can see it on the screen. So I am going to start with my skyline, and it's going to be very light and kind of a wavy line. I'm going to have a little bit of a tree line. And then I'm going to bring down my horizon line, and that's going to be very wavy too. So how does that look? Looks a little more like this. You guys can see it better with this one. So I have a skyline that's kind of a, and you guys will all do it slightly different. It's totally fine. But it's going to be kind of up in the upper area. So you can see I have it there too, right? And then this is going to be kind of a hillside that's going to be a different tone. And then these are far away trees. And then this is my actual horizon line. Kind of, we'll say what is the ground plane. And I haven't done the path yet. We're doing a path, but I haven't done that yet. All right, so those are the lines that you want to see. And you want it very light. I made this very dark so that everybody could see it, you know. But let me go like this so you can see a little better. Because when I initially did it, nobody could see it. And then I was like, but you don't want a lot of pencil on there. Okay, and then the last part that you're going to do on it, and I'll do this kind of so you can see both, is pick a spot and you're going to create a path that's going to go a little bit to the right, narrowly to the left, and then it's going to expand right out onto the page right over here on this corner. Now that's going to seem kind of weird. So you see how I've done that a little bit to the right, kind of sweep it around so it hits here. So it's kind of like a Z, we'll say, kind of shape. And then I'm going to do another narrow line next to it. Bring it over here. Bring it over here. And then this one will come out over here someplace. So what you notice about these paths is they start very wide. I am standing in this road, right? And I'm looking at it going off a very far distance. And that's what you want it to look like. So it should start super wide. I'm standing right there. And then it kind of moves because, you know, unless it's a really straight path, which you could do a really straight path. That would be like 2 direct lines. But we're going to do a meandering path. And it kind of sweeps in this direction, but it gets very narrow and slim. Okay? When you guys get ready to do your finals, right? When we go to our pictures of EMC Park, you will do light pencil line like this. But I'm going to ask that you don't outline everything with pencil. You're not going to outline every leaf or everything. You're going to pick the major areas of change, right? Like if you have part of one of the playground equipment, that would be an area of change. If you have an area of trees, that would be one whole area of trees, even if they're different types of trees. Because we're going to paint them, we're not going to draw them. Does that make sense? Okay. So we've done that. Now, that was a great thing to do. Now we can go back to this. So we're going to come back to our sponge and get our burnt orange. Because I wanted this to dry just a smidge before I did this. And then again, we're going to go with this burnt orange. I have a tiny bit of green that got in there, but I'm going to go with it. Because sometimes there's a little green in there. And again, light source. So we want to keep the darker tones, on one side. Turn that sponge. And sometimes you'll have darker tones that peek underneath here, like this, on some of the lighter areas. So don't be afraid to add a little like that. Kind of underneath the leaves, we'll say, in different areas. In some of these, at this point, you might start to create larger filled-in spaces, which is fine. But you want it to still look kind of piecey like this. I'm going to bring in just a little bit of this darker tone over here. And when you do the sponge, notice it should last. If you have enough paint on there, you should be getting, I have plenty to kind of keep working this. And so at this point you should also be able to see kind of that tone change, that light to dark. We're going to really build that with the last color. So the last color, I'm going to say rinse this off a little. I'm running out of paper towel. Dry it off a little. And I'm going to invite you guys. Now's really not a good time. Yeah. Okay, go quick, go quick, go quick. Okay, so, sorry. The last thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is create your own red. Now, red's an interesting tone, and red can be pulled into a lot of different directions. You could create a red that has purple in it, so you could bring a little blue into it, and that would be more of a purple red. You could bring a little orange into it, and that would make it a deeper red. I am going to add, because I like this tone, you see that magenta? It's hard to see on the screen. This is kind of an orangey red. That could be cool too. Actually, I did this last time. I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a little of this orange. So I'm going to add a little of this orange to my red. But I want it to be a little darker. So I'm going to take a little tiny bit of the browns and add it to it. So create your own red. You guys decide. This is practice, but I also want you guys to be able to start making decisions on how you want this to look. Yeah, I like that. That's good. I like that's a deep red. That's nice. And then I'm going to take my lovely little sponge. I'm going to work kind of a slightly different end of my sponge and bring that in. And now I'm going to start with the red. Now, if you want your color tones to be very distinctive, you could wait a little bit more in between each coat, and it would give you a little less bleed and a little bit more of a distinctive color. So I guess it depends on how you want it to look. We're working as an exercise in class, so it's kind of like we're going to give this, you know, a try in this direction, but you guys should know that you can do this a few different ways. This is just one technique. And I'm building this up again with my light source in consideration. I'm going to use just a tiny bit of red in some spots up over here, but leave that a little bit lighter in this area, and then a little bit heavier in some other areas. Mm-hmm. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, and I may just hold on to that red paint in case I want to come back to it. I'm not going to dry the sponge or rinse it. I want you guys to create a brown. So in some of your palettes there may be just one brown. In some of your palettes there may be a darker and a kind of a warmer brown. Start with just that base of brown. Again, get some paint over here. And I'm going to work it a little side to side because I'm going to have it light and dark. In fact, I may bring the light up here. So I want, again, we're going to start light to dark with the trunk. And you could, there's a little bit of a beige, I think, in there. You can use a little bit of a beige to kind of mix with that brown so you get kind of a soft gray. And if you're like, oh geez, I don't know what this color looks like, take a paper towel and just bring it across the paper towel, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that looks good. It's kind of like a light brown gray. We want that. Okay? And then we're going to start to work the trunk on the side that we have light. So which side do we have light? You guys remember? For me. Top, but what top what? Top right, thank you. So on the top right, so on the right side of that trunk, we are going to want to bring in the light side of the tree. So I'm going to come up just a little here. I'm not going to worry about getting too close to this. And I'm going to bring this side down. I make it very craggy looking. Trunks are, again, not like a straight line, but they're textured. And I'm going to have it come out like this, and maybe a little bit like this, to show the, we'll say, the roots. You can try to bring a few branches in with this light, but it's really, those are going to be more dark, so let's hold off on that. And then I might bring just a little spot here. See that little spot I'm creating? And you know what? Let me do this. Hold on. Is that better? You guys can see that a little better? I know, it's super tiny. Now, once I do that, I'm going to get a slightly medium brown, which is the straight brown. I'm going to add a little bit of red to it to make it a little bit different. And it's okay if this bleeds a little. Notice we did not pre-wet the paper this time. And I'm going to make a little bit of a middle band for this trunk. And I'll bring a little of this color right in here in one of the areas that comes down to root, to the ground plane, we'll say. You see that? And this looks, very, I'm going to put a little bit right here underneath that little knob. Very loose. And now I want a real dark color. And to get a real dark color, you can add, I like adding purple and then a tiny bit of black. So, again, we want these complex colors. We don't want like straight out of the pan colors. So I've got now a nice purpley brown, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of black. Black is strong. So take it lightly at first. And that makes a nice dark brown tone. Okay. And I have a lot on my brush, so I'm going to dab that off a little so I don't have quite so much throughout my brush. And then I'm going to start to bring it out on the left side of the tree with a super dark tone. Doesn't look as dark as I want, so I'm going to bring in just a little more of that dark. There we go. It should be darker than your middle tone. So if you need to adjust it, adjust it. And I'm bringing it up a little bit more to the left here. Remember, tree trunks are odd shapes. We're doing a tiny tree, but I have a little bit of that light space that I created. And then I'm going to bring another root out in this direction that's in shadow. And the bottom of this tree should look a little bit like that. You can add some of these darker tones in where you would think shadows would be, if you want. Like so. And I have that little light spot, but I think it looks a little strange, so I'm going to make it more of a medium tone. So I'm going to bring in that other brown, soften that just a little, just so it gives some differentiation to the tree but doesn't look like a weird white stripe. Now with my darkest tone, I'm going to start to bring in the branches. What you want to think about with the branches is, yes, they come out from the trunk and they go this way, but not all branches are going exactly in a radial pattern. They're going to change direction. And you don't see them all directly from the trunk out. You see a branch, even just looking outside. I look outside at that tree that's kind of yellowish and green, and I can see branches through the leaves. So you won't see all of those leaves all at once, or all of the branches all at once. So I'm going to bring this out a little bit. Let me get too much here. There we go. And I'm going to start to bring in some of these branch shapes, but again, they can change direction. And just play with this and get it just the way you want it. So on my sample, you kind of saw how the branches go through. They'll get thinner as they come out here. Make them sporadic, make them change direction. I think my red's still a tiny bit wet, but you might have some connections, but not a ton. And some you will see bring right to the trunk. So you can take one or two a little thicker right to the trunk that you might see. This is going to be super fine brush. This is going to be try to let them fan out to a wispier line on the outside edges. Something like this. All right, last step on this is going to be the ground plane. Now, what am I going to do for ground plane? The last one I did kind of a yellowy, but I think I'm going to do a brownish green. So we're going to, again, start with that brown. I'm going to bring it over here because I don't like my greens mixing in. And then you can add a tiny bit of blue and a tiny bit of yellow. That was a little more than a tiny bit of yellow. Hold on, a little more blue. There we go. And if you, at this point, I have a kind of a nice green that's very kind of earthy toned, so mild. You can add a tiny bit of this bright green if you want, just to bring it up a little. And now I want to wash that out and make it very light. We'll use the greens again, so I'm not worried about it. Now, just like we did the gourd, remember the stem of the gourd wasn't right on the top of the gourd, but it was kind of in the field? The bottom of this trunk is not going to be at the top of your grass line. It's going to be in the field. So you are going to take your grass line and bring it up here someplace on the trunk. And it should be light and kind of washed on the side that is, the light side of the tree. So you notice I'm going around a leaf, which is fun. I'm going right up to my tree and trying to get it as close as I can. And then I'm going to get a little more paint, but this is very light. As I go down a little further, I'm getting a little darker, but not much. And now I'm going to get a little bit of a darker tone and start to bring that in here, because we have more shadow over here, so this tone is going to be darker, not as washed out. Think about the shadow that you might have on the tree. or that the trunk would cast going back here. So I'm making kind of a little casted shadow in a darker tone. I'm making it a little dark in here between these two roots, because that probably would be darker. Like that. And then I'm going to come back to that wash, just a lighter tone, maybe a tiny bit of yellow to it. And I'm going to finish off the other side of this in that lighter tone. And again, we're building up slightly more distinctive lines, so we did not pre-wash this, but you may get a tiny bit of bleeding if they're close together, and that's okay. Now, another really fun thing that you can do, but we have to wait till it dries, is we could actually have some leaves that fall, but we want to wait till this dries because then we'll have the green bleeding with the red or orange, and that's going to look goofy, right? So we don't want that. So we're going to let that dry. That's one tree down. And we're going to do a few tones in here, just a little bit to prep this, and then we'll come over here and start with some greens. Okay. So I'm going to have you guys do a little blue. Kind of a light, slightly purpley gray. Okay. And then we are gonna pre-wet the sky for this. So we're gonna come down to that one just below, pre-wet the sky and hill area, because we do want that kind of soft. And then we're going to take that blue-gray and we're going to build in that sky plane. Now, this is a trick that you guys learned yesterday, so I'm going to almost fill it all the way in, the sky. And then I'm going to come back with a paper towel and soften it to create my clouds. So we want this like really kind of light. And if your tone is slightly different than mine, it's totally fine. And we're just doing the sky at this point. And I left a little bit of white in there, but I'm going to come back now with my paper towel. I left it a little darker on the left side too, which I like, I think. And I'm going to come back with a tiny piece of paper towel. Any old piece that you have lying around. Remember, scrunch it up a little bit so you don't have an even thing. And then just hit it just a tiny bit to soften that and give you a sense of clouds. Again, just like the sponge, we turn it. We don't have it all in the same direction. And this paper towel trick I really like because it's kind of, it allows a lot of forgiveness on the surface of the page. So if you need to soften an area, you need to lift up some color. It's a really great trick if you put something down and you're like, ugh, I can't stand that. And you just dab it off and start again. This one is kind of a bluish gray. So I do blue with a tiny bit of red, you know, just to make it purple, and then you can add a little bit of yellow. So that looks skyish, doesn't it? Kind of skyish. I'm going to give myself just, I'm going to try this because I think it might be nice. Just a little bit of along this kind of back here a little bit of darkness. So I'm making these kind of stripy lines. And again, I'm going to do this paper towel trick so it's not too strong. And then I'm going to leave it. So that looks like a great sky. And then I'm going to make more of a true purpley color. Like a slightly darker color. And that's going to be my kind of background hill. And again, I want this to be soft, so I'm going to come in with this wet brush. And just go over that. And then this should be darker. Because this is now land. And it may bleed over to where your trees are, but that's okay because we'll go over that. And again, it's a meandering line. It's not a perfect line, but it should be darker and maybe a different tone than the sky. I'm making it purple, but if you made it, you could make it greener or browner if you wanted to. Alright, I'm going to leave that and let that dry. Now, I'm going to turn off the video in just a second, but I'm going to give you guys instructions on the next step. So I need your eyes just to be up here for a minute. So with what you've got, we're going to spend another maybe 5 minutes working before we have to clean up. Okay. So I want you guys to, given what you learned from this tree, start this tree on the yellowy background. I want you to do a summer tree, so it's going to be a green tree. I want you to start with 3 shades of green. So one might be a light yellowy green, a deeper green, medium green, and then a darker one. And then we'll have I haven't done the final color on this, which is going to be just even darker. Okay, so we want 4 shades. So light, kind of light, and medium. Let's start with those. As you do those, and you could use reds too, because I have a couple of samples of this. I want you to build up the evergreen trees on the one that's above, because you'll have all the paint mixed, so you may as well bring it in. And I've done it with blues, greens, and reds and oranges, or you can, this one I just did with different shades of green. So again, I started with lighter ones, I worked in the back, those are behind, and I just did a little diamond type shape, and then I came over them with the darker tones. If you have 2 that are close to each other, I made one a little more blue, one a little more green, and then I filled in some spaces. I want these to not look like exactly evenly spaced, right? I want them to be like these are close together and then these are a little farther apart, okay? So I want you guys to try to do those 2 things and then we'll clean up.